Welcome, bienvenue, welcome once again to a very good live stream all about property. If you're not already watching it, why haven't you been here before? We talk about property every week on Thursdays. I am joined by my esteemed colleagues, Hamish McLay of Search and Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke LLP, and of course, Chris Gilsenan, Route Home, covering, I would say, the three of the corners. But there are other corners to cover, and that's why we have special guests. Today, we are joined by the inimitable Sean Mansfield of Capital Value Surveyors, those people that ensure that what we're buying isn't, in fact, snake oil. Welcome, one and all. Today's topic, I believe, is all about that one thing that none of us can control, time. What is it, the old saying? Time is something you can't control. Lunchtime, doubly so. So, to that end, I will first throw under the bus, of course, the esteemed leader of this woeful pack, Hamish McLay. Why does time kill deals, Hamish?
Oh, there is so much goes on in it. I mean, we had some interesting conversations over the last sort of few weeks, and one of the sort of major aspects can actually be something that's holding up what's going on. It could be lack of preparation on part of some people involved, but there could be all sorts of other things which are beyond many individuals sort of controlling it. And what is, of course, interesting, and I mean, I've had this experience, and everybody here has. They have the experience. They've done everything they ought to have done. And then they call upon somebody like Sean to have a look into it. And Sean says, "Oh, this is looking a little bit." But that doesn't necessarily need to hold it up, because, I mean, it is. And a lot of people forget to ask the likes of Sean, "Hey, what can we do about this?" So there is many factors that can actually sort of, make different challenges with a particular sort of time. And what we try and do, of course, in terms of my own sort of work, we try and make sure that one of those isn't local authority searches. However, that is easy to control compared to many of the other things we're about to hear of.
So, Juliet, does time really kill deals? I thought everybody has plenty of time for everything, do they not?
Look, there's a certain momentum that's required in a deal, and you find that when that momentum is alive and kicking and everyone's doing what they're supposed to do, the deal, especially for me in terms of transactional work, for example, I'll send Sean an email, late in the night. Sean, does it affect your valuation? He'll come back to me sort of almost immediately, because he knows the site, he knows the deal, and it works like clockwork. But often you've got people in the equation who just go quiet, or you don't hear anything from them, or whatever it is, and you think, well, actually, what's happening here? Why are they delaying the process? Why is this? Why is there that elongated time frame in terms of getting the delay back? And normally at that point, in terms of getting the reply back, and normally that's as a result of something going awry. So maybe you've got a borrower who's going somewhere else for a loan, or they don't like the property anymore. So time, to some extent, does kill deals. It comes from a marketing terminology where if you find a buyer, you've got to pursue and get them to commit. The conveyancing process is a little bit different. And while time is a key factor, there are a whole host of other things, complexities of transaction, people being third parties. The land registry, for example, if something's there getting registered, you can chase and chase. You can ask for it to be expedited, but that doesn't mean that, it's not within your control. And that can potentially kill a deal, especially if you've got a mortgage offer that's about to expire and you've got something pending at the land registry and it's not yet registered. So, unless the lender's willing to extend their offer, that will kill a deal because the borrower no longer has finances in place. So there's a whole host of things that can kill deals, but time is quite an important one, yes.
Chris, I see you nodding away. Does time kill deals? Is it the borrower's fault?
There's lots of moving parts in the process, and sometimes they just don't align for whatever reason.
Right.
And it's a constant moving set of moving goalposts, but it does boil down to human nature, and I guess in part people get frustrated, they get impatient, they have shiny penny syndrome, and when you've got buyers and sellers in the process, and there's almost there's a huge layer of professionals in the midst, and sometimes the buyer and seller, they don't get to see what's going on. They don't have full transparency of the process end to end. So I can understand where the impatience does come from, and people are starting to look to the next thing. And you may have an offer on the table. You may have gone with an offer knowing that the process is going to be quick because it might be a cash buyer that you're working with, but there could be another offer that's on the table, or someone comes and brings into the process, which is a bit high, and you're like, well, this is taking so long, so why don't I jump to the next best thing? So yeah, it can frustrate. The process. It can be a challenge time.
I mean, from my perspective, I've often thought, well, people are all locked into this process. It's just a matter of time moving on. And then suddenly I didn't realize that part of the moving parts have, in fact, jumped ship entirely. I mean, is this still a thing? I thought that was a thing from the 80s, but no, it seems to be very here and now.
Yeah, very much so. It's human nature. So right. We've touched on it many times in these conversations that communication is key, but certainly from the buyers and sellers perspective, when things don't line up or things go wrong, it is human nature to think, well, it's better over there. Why don't I go over there?
So Sean, is it your job to pull out the underpinnings of people's hopes and dreams when you find that subterranean hole underneath the house they're about to purchase? Is that what you're doing, or are you actually saving them before they actually make a complete nosedive into the quagmire?
Well, of course, we're going to say we're saving a buyer's time and money. We're ruining the hopes and dreams of the seller, and most times they're a buyer as well on the other end of the chain. So I think from a valuer's point of view, and without wanting to tread on anyone's toes in terms of what time impacts them, I think what Chris said there is you've got a buyer and a seller, and you've got these professionals in between. And often, as Chris suggested, you might think the seller might think they've got a cash buyer, and 9 times out of 10, it turns out they're not a cash buyer. They need to get a valuation done, even for a specialist lender. And so all of a sudden, this additional time that it takes to get a valuation instructed, booked in, paid for, completed, audited, and then considered is thrown into the timeline that wasn't there in the seller's minds on day one. And I think not only does it impact the professionals in between, but what it does is it sort of chips away, I think, at that goodwill between the buyer and the seller, that they thought, I'll accept this offer because it's a cash buyer. And then all of a sudden it turns out it doesn't. And I think that an element of goodwill is lost because that additional time that wasn't anticipated is thrown into the mix. So I think that the same can be said between a lender and a valuer. You know, a lender might say, right, you've got the instruction because you can turn this around in 2 or 3 days. Right. And then you take 5 days. And then the knock-on effect is the lender's not happy, their borrower's not happy, the broker's not happy, the buyer or seller's not happy. And so it might kill a deal, and it very well could kill a deal, but at the very least, it could affect goodwill between all the different parties in the process.
Is it all about perception, Hamish? If you set expectations a certain way so that they realize there is some laxity within the deal anyway, surely everybody will just get on and come to terms rather than constantly being disappointed.
Well, there is that challenge, of course, because very often people who are involved do have the expectations. It's not as though either that people are stopped. They aren't in a sort of time frame and they're just sort of doing absolutely nothing else. They have lives to lead, and if they are not speaking to the right people in the first place, who are indicating to them what is happening and when they need to do things the right way. This is one of the great things about it. And one of the things that we've been able to, between the team of us speaking together, we see this. If people are engaging, if our buyer, if our seller happens to be engaging appropriately with the proper professional within they will explain what the expectations of the buyer, because they will have spoken to the buyer, they've spoken to the seller, so they will understand exactly what each of them wants to do. So there needs to be that level of understanding, and if that is the case, the expectation side of it is no longer becomes a worry, but it's when you're not engaged properly with people who can actually explain what is going on. I think that's the big challenge. People coming in with no knowledge, no understanding, and they're just expecting the whole thing just to sort of go, sort of fall away and sort of happen. And it's not like that. And I mean, I have a very, very easy role to play in it when I look at the really incredible sort of depth of knowledge that's required from the legal perspective, the likes of Juliet, and of course there's the likes of what Chris is doing there, because he's got a mind that's looking at things and he can see a way that things can actually sort of happen. But of course it then depends on what Sean's come up with when he actually sort of looks and sort of survey, hey, hang on, we can't quite do what we wanted to do in the first place because of. But as I said, the expectation, that worrisome aspect can be taken away by actually speaking to the right professionals about exactly what is going on.
In that vein, Juliet, what can we do? If we are coming into a deal like this, what can we do to make sure that we set our expectations correctly? What can be done?
Do your research, do your homework. I've always said, getting the right professionals on the deal from day one. So do some homework in terms of their expertise and what sort of deals they've done before. Transparency. If you're a borrower, for example, and you're refinancing a property and you're aware of issues and you fail to disclose those issues, it's my job as a lender's lawyer to look within the documents that you've provided and find and sniff out those issues. It's Sean's job when he goes on site to look for things that could affect, the actual value of the property. And we will sniff these things out, because we've been doing this for such a long time. And the reality is that will cause a delay because the borrower hasn't been transparent. I've had borrowers who are getting monies from their parents, for example, and they need to execute certain documents, a deed of gift, whatever it is, but they've not disclosed that. If they disclose that upfront, we as lawyers could actually say, this is what's required. These are, the documents that you need to sign, etc. And we can get over that hurdle. But it's when you bring things at the last minute that you could have told us up front, so that the level of transparency isn't there, because you think, look, it's a bridging deal. So bridging means it's fast. Bridging doesn't mean that the legals are going to be fast or that the legals are going to be less diligent. We're there to protect our lender. So the reality is, if you were honest, if you were transparent in the beginning, we could deal with those issues, take views, look at alternatives, etc. So for me, it's all about communication. So being upfront and honest with what you've got, being transparent, and finding the right professional. So you can never drum that too much, because the reality is the right professionals will handhold, take you through the process, look at things or issues that they've seen before. Because, as I said, conveyancing, there's always issues. There's never going to be, yes, you do have those odd vanilla properties where it's all fine and dandy, but there are always issues. And we as experts, we've seen them before. We know what routes or what courses of action are less risk adverse and protect our respective clients, etc. So choose the right professionals.
Chris, is it always the way that if the surveyor comes up with something that you run a mile, or are you willing to take risks?
No, I love getting surveys done. Surveys have saved us many thousands over the years from different transactions. They've caused us to walk away from deals, which if we'd have got into without having the survey and realizing that actually we've missed X, Y, and Z, and the refurb costs had doubled, it would have murdered us. So yeah, I'm very thankful for having the right team members and taking the time to make sure we get them instructed and go through their advice with a fine tooth comb. So they bring huge value to the deal. So although they're not
the killjoys, they're the sanity checkers. You're saying.
They're a necessity. They're an absolute necessity. Yeah, because any numpty can go into an estate agent and buy a house. That's not how it works. That doesn't make it a good deal. that just makes you a consumer. That doesn't make you a professional investor in any capacity. So knowing how the process works, how to assess a deal, how to bring in the professionals to help you assess that deal and get to the number that you need to make that project commercially viable, that's crucial.
Fabulous. Sean, we're just about to wind this up, but before we do, have you got any thoughts, any last words you want to put out? Remember, today's title is Time Kills Deals. What advice can you give all those prospective buyers out there to help them make sure they do things as time sensitively as possible?
Well, I think it's not just buyers, because obviously deals can be a refinance, like Juliet says as well. So information upfront as soon as possible in the process is key, because what we don't want to do is get to a situation where we've seen the property, we're waiting to issue our report, and we're waiting for somebody else to give us information that could have been available at the start. And often is the case that we're waiting for information from a client effectively. So that's the first obvious thing. The extreme risk to a delay is that if the delay is substantial, you become more vulnerable to changes in material costs, changes in interest rates, changes in market sentiment. There could be another buyer snooping around looking to either gazump or gazunder you. You know, if you don't get things done as quickly as you hope to, you leave yourself vulnerable to all of these other external factors. One thing that in terms of valuation, though, is quite interesting is that everybody, I know what Chris is saying about you're a consumer if you go and buy a house, but everybody does have this underlying feeling that they know what a house is worth. And human nature is, from our point of view, it's quite interesting. If we don't value something at what, especially in a purchase, if we value a property at less than a property is being purchased for, 9 times out of 10, the inclination is to challenge our valuation rather than trying to negotiate the price. You're telling them they're overpaying, and the inclination is still, I want to overpay rather than negotiate the price. So it's really difficult to get the human side of it out of the equation, because we're all like that, and we all think we know how to value a property, and value and worth are two different things. A property is not...
I think the bizarre thing is, I think sometimes people think that surveyors have a hidden agenda.
We have no vested interest in deals. I mean, we just want to give our clients the right advice. And I think people often throw the phrase about something's worth what someone's willing to pay, and it's not. Those two things are completely independent, and most of the time they coincide, but often they don't as well. So, you know, we see it as a good thing sometimes if we can give someone an opportunity to negotiate.
Well, no, it's good. Go on.
Certainly the best weapon to go into a negotiation with. It's from an independent third party and a professional. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to get back into negotiations, and the fact people don't realise that just blows my mind.
Juliet, any last words?
I think yes, communication, as we've all said, communication.
We'll bang on about that.
Yeah, so we can't bang on it enough. So communication.
Okay, perfect. And last words to you, our esteemed leader, Hamish. How do we tie this up in a bow for me?
Well, the advantage is, if you were to take 4 of us who are involved with a transaction, there wouldn't be a challenge with communication. We would pick up a phone, we would do this, we would get the information back, we will do our utmost to actually sort of put that. Doesn't always happen. But what I do appreciate, of course, is the transparency of that surveyor. It's such an important aspect. Having been involved with various things in the past, and some people, I mean, one of the worst ones was one situation he got himself. He was a cash buyer, and he left it really too late to actually bring the surveyor in to actually sort of look at the whole process. And I knew straight away from our particular side of things that, hey, look, if you've got a loft conversion, you do need building regulation. And it didn't have any. And of course, it was obvious the surveyor was going to pick up on that. But when do you get background information from the information that we can provide? But the transparency is important. Transparency, communication, and when you've got both of those, it really does make a difference.
As ever, I have to thank each one of you for taking part today. Thank you so much, Hamish, McLay, of course, Search Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, Chris Gilsenan, somebody right at the razor's edge himself of Route Home, and of course our special guest Sean Mansfield. Hope you come back again, Sean. That was very valuable. But once again, this has been Property Quorum. We seek to talk about and shine a new light on stuff that people should talk more about. And it turns out today's was brought to you by the letter C and the word communication. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.